Welcome to Naples Daily Newsmakers. I'm Manny Garcia, editor of the Naples Daily News. Coming up a little bit later in our program, we will check in with Julie Glenn about some last-minute gift ideas and also about wine, which is her expertise. But first, joining me in the studio is Arek Sarkissian, the Naples Daily News bureau chief in Tallahassee. Arek, great to have you today with us.
It's great to be here, Manny.
This is a great opportunity to have you here. I mean, you're one of the top journalists in the state, an award-winning journalist. I know you're very humble about that, but for us it's a great time to have you on the show. So what we want to do is sort of talk about the upcoming legislative session and what do you see as the priorities. And so I'm just going to toss it out there. How's our state budget looking for 2016?
The state budget's going to be pretty interesting because unlike it was previously, there's a good bit of money in reserve that lawmakers will have to do different things with, and it's a question what they're going to do with it. There's also a question of how much there is in reserves. Governor Scott's budget folks say there's 1.6 billion, but I think the Senate's staying a bit more reserved at that 635 million. There's also a concern of with those reserves, how much of that is recurring, how much of that is one time. We don't want to try and build our budget up now, then down the road, that money that they've built it on isn't there anymore. That's not good business, and I think that for once, I think actually the Senate's actually clamping down, and they want to be careful before they walk through, unlike the governor that's kind of going full kilter with all that money.
So horse trading, right? The typical political horse trading you expect?
Plenty of chits going back and forth. One of them, I think, in my opinion, is probably going to be, there's been talk about changing FRS. There's going to be some minor changes. The House has wanted to change FRS, the pension plan, for years. The Senate has not been too keen on the idea. They've got a lot of ties into a lot of the law enforcement that are tied into that pension plan. But with that said, I think that the Senate's really interested in giving some state employees some raises. Some of the lawmakers have said that if they can see raises for employees, they could see some changes to FRS. So that's going to be an interesting horse trade right there.
Wonderful. So you were good enough to give us a very good list between you and your editor, Brett Blackledge, but we see is just going to be some of the legislative priorities for the session. So I'm going to run through this list and just weigh in. One of the things that has really been playing out in this market has been Uber and Lyft. So can you talk about how that's you think is going to play out in the session this year?
Yeah, I'll bet money that our residents and our readers in Collier and also if, some of the folks who have ties to Sarasota are going to be worried about that, because I think our commission here actually did away with regulation of taxi cabs, and they did that partly for Uber and for companies like Uber and Lyft. The House has a plan right now that would preempt, they would require some insurance. There would be some insurance requirements for drivers who are from like Uber and Lyft that would preempt any regulation that has been passed locally. That's sure to ruffle some feathers down here in Southwest Florida.
Sure. So explain to me this term here, low-income pool funding, and why our viewers and readers should care about this.
That's the small. It's funny because it's Medicaid is a $23 billion chunk of our $79 billion budget. It's a good chunk of our budget, but low-income pool funding is only a small fraction of that. But those are the folks that don't have any insurance and they need to get help. We need to have that. Last year, there was a fight there over. If you ask Senate President Gardner, he says the fight was over the fact that the feds, which chip in a chunk of low-income pool funding, would not give us a number. There's a push from the feds that they want the state to adopt the principles of the Affordable Care Act, which our lawmakers don't want to do right now. So they went in with providing us $1 billion last year, and then we matched that with $400 million. Now there's going to be a fight between the House and the Senate of whether that $400 million is going to be enough to cover last year and the upcoming, or the current fiscal year and the upcoming fiscal year. The issue there is the House thinks that we're going to be fine, free, and clear. The Senate isn't so sure. I think that Senate President Gardner has Senator Rene Garcia, who's in charge of a lot of healthcare issues, to look at that and make sure that we're on solid footing as we move forward in the budget process.
And how would that impact our local healthcare facilities and hospitals?
It all depends on whether they can get paid to treat the low-income folks. If you come in, you don't have health insurance, you got to make sure that you're covered. There's a plan by the governor right now to change how that operates. So there's already some concern that if they don't have that money, that they're not going to be able to keep operating the way they are.
For indigent care.
Correct.
Yeah. Let me ask you, this is another issue that's very close to us here, and Senator Garrett Richter's been very involved. It's the Seminole Compact. Tell me how you see that playing out in 2016.
That's also going to be really interesting, and I spoke with Senator Richter, and he's no longer the head of the committee that handles that, and I think he's actually glad, because gambling is a tough sell in Florida, because there's not one specific, there's not one agreement that anyone can get along, that anyone can go to, that everyone's going to be happy. As of right now, there's a question of whether this compact is an expansion of gambling or not. Most people would say it is. You talk to Senate President Gardner, he says absolutely not. You talk to the senator who he had setting all that up, Senator Rob Bradley, he says it more or less contracts because we're taking dormant licenses back from pari-mutuels and whatnot. You ask the folks over in the House, they say no, this is expansion. We think this should go before a constitutional amendment, which will be up to the voters. So, and the House had done a lot of work on this and taking their stance last year. The bill, which was led by Tampa Rep Dana Young, never went through, but you have Representative Young, who's pretty powerful over there in the House, and Rep Jose Diaz, who's the Regulatory Affairs Chair. I'm pretty sure they're going to clamp down on their beliefs that this probably needs to go before, this is an expansion that probably needs to go for a constitutional amendment. So that's going to be interesting.
Wow, wow. I was going to ask you, and so in the wake of the shooting in San Bernardino and in the community college in Oregon, discussion of guns, open carry, campus carry is going to be a big issue. Talk about how you see that playing out in the state capitol.
I think that the bills have actually marched through fairly swiftly in the House committees and are posturing themselves to go onto the floor. It's the Senate that's going to pose as a sticking point. As of right now, both open carry, which is by Senator Don Gates and his son, who's represented over in the House by by Representative Matt Gates, it's going to get stuck in the same Judiciary Committee that the campus carry died last year. The committee chair for that is not keen on the idea of allowing guns on campus. I know that all 12 universities, all 12 university presidents, and all 12 university police departments are opposed to the idea of allowing people to carry on campus, and for that matter, carry openly. The argument with that is, if we had another incident like what happened at FSU a couple years ago, where there's a gentleman who fired shots on Stroger Library, what happened if one of those students were armed? Could they have stopped him before he kept firing?
Sure.
But then there's the question of the police department in that case did a great job. They were there within minutes. So. Wow,
wow, important issues. I was going to transition to talk about the tax cut packages, because that's always, you always hear politicians and talking about tax cuts. So talk about the tax cut package and the strategy behind that.
The Governor Rick Scott is of the belief that, with a lot of people in the state, that the way to grow the state is by growing through its commercial sector. So the idea is to provide commercial sector with as much opportunity to grow as possible. In this case, it's with the vast majority, I think $750 million of his $1 billion tax cut package. That's the way he wants the state to grow. The question that we have there is, number one, whether we have the money to include that tax package. Goes back to how much money we have in reserves, and also if there's other ways that we could be spending that money. By taking money off of the table, it's a question of whether there's other areas that we could better use that money in the budget.
Sure. Another issue that's very, very close to us and a point of discussion has been fracking. Very hot button issue in this county with the drilling off to the eastern part of the county. How do you see that playing out?
That's going to be very interesting. That goes back to the same thing as the Uber and Lyft debate, where we're talking about preemption. The legislature has a tendency of wanting to come in and try and create a giant policy for the entire state. There are governments all over the state that are very clamped down on. They've banned fracking in their area, or the area of tight regulations. The big sticking point with that bill, which is by Ray Rodriguez, who's up there in Estero, is that preemption clause that I think that Rep. Rodriguez told me he's willing to take off. There's some reps who said that if it still has that preemptive clause, that bill's going to die on the House floor. Rep. Rodriguez says he's willing to take it out. There's also a question of there's a lot of the chemicals they use for fracking is able to stay behind an exemption in the public record. So let's say, Manny, if you wanted to figure out what chemicals you're using
Sure.
to pump near your
Of
house,
course.
you couldn't look them up because they're considered trade secrets. But obviously there's a concern with some people of what are they pumping into the ground? What toxins are you putting out by my house?
Does DEP have the ability to know exactly what those chemicals are that's being pumped into?
They do, and that's another problem is that DEP, not a lot of folks in the state who are not big fans of DEP, and they don't exactly trust how DEP is doing it. They feel that they're moving too quickly with it. They feel like they're not putting enough money into it. They feel like the agency is very cash strapped. Governor Scott's recommended budget includes cutting positions from DEP, and so that came out right when this bill went before a committee. And so a lot of people during that committee meeting were saying, you're already cutting positions. How do we know you're going to protect us without us knowing what's being pumped into the ground?
Okay. So the other topic I wanted to weigh in with you is, it's
Yeah.
almost like a two-pronged question, but it has to do with education. We have a very robust, strong school system in our area, as well as, Collier County School District is very strong, and we have robust, growing universities here. How do you see higher ed and K through 12 playing out here? What do you think?
I think K through 12 should fare well in the budget. I need to still look at the numbers of how it's going to what the costs are going to be per student. It's definitely not going to be the amount of money that the Democrats would want to see. Right now, one of the big debates also is going to be about charter schools. There's more money going towards charter schools. They're also trying. If you saw that Associated Press report, they've given a bunch of money to charter schools, and they don't exactly know where it went. So now the lawmakers want to come back and say, okay, well, we need to create protections for this. The Democrats are going to come back and say, well, why don't we put more money into our K through 12 education?
Right, and earlier last year, Jacob Carpenter did a very strong series on charter schools that documented all the failings and all the money that had been used in charter schools, which eventually the Department of Education adopted some of his findings to change the way charter schools are run. So I think it's a very important issue. Arek, I want to really thank you for being here today. It's a real joy to be working with you, and I look forward to having you again. I have the pleasure of joining this morning with my dear colleague, Julie Glenn, who writes our Going Grape column, which is a terrific way for you to learn about wine, champagne, you name it. She is great, and we're very fortunate to have her working with us. So Julie, welcome. Great to have you here.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
And what we're going to do is, we're going to have you talk about first in a couple of segments, but the first one we're going to start with is talk to us about last-minute gift ideas and wines or just something to buy.
Well, it can really stress people out getting wine for people. Going into a wine shop and you want to get something for somebody, but you don't know exactly what they like, or you're maybe not too confident about your own skills in selecting a wine. That's for a lot of people. So my suggestion is walk into the store and ask the person working there, I need to get something for my boss. I want to remain employed. What do you suggest?
Exactly.
I don't want them to think I'm making too much money, so I probably want to stay on the budget end. So you want to make sure you get your budget right, or you want to be incredibly impressive and show that you spent so much, so you can do that. You have your price scale thing, and then you have the grapes that you can choose from. All the different kinds of wines from all around the world. Maybe you want to send a message that you want to take that business trip to France, so you can get a French wine. But if you don't want to get wine and you feel a little bit overwhelmed with that, you can always get different wine accessories, and there are a ton of those out on the market.
Terrific. Love to hear from them.
So yeah, and if you're not, if you don't feel great about just selecting a wine and you don't want to be stuck in, you don't want to be pigeonholed in, Prosecco category or wherever, you can just go a blanket statement with a wine accessory type gift. There are all kinds of gadgets out there. You could go as far as high-tech electrical wine bottle openers that can cost you $100 to $200, or you could go with a really good basic waiter's corkscrew, which is probably my favorite.
Okay.
I brought one to show you.
Terrific.
If you're getting a regular corkscrew, make sure that you get one that has 2 hinges, because I've been given them when they only have 1 hinge. You get it all the way into the cork and you can't open it because it's too far to get to here. So you want to have a 2-hinged waiter's corkscrew. This is the easiest, best kind of corkscrew in the world.
Okay.
I've tried and failed with so many high-tech wine corkscrews. I could not get the bottle open. It's so frustrating. But that is always my go-to. So, and it's really inexpensive. So you can add that to a wine, tie it with a little ribbon on the side of a wine bottle, and say this is what most people who open a lot of wine bottles use. So there's that. You can also go with glassware. If you want to
Okay.
get glassware, you can get, you want to make sure that the lip of the glass is very thin. That's what people are always going for. And here in Florida, it's great to get plastic glassware because there are so many people that take their wine out by the pool or in the boat. And once you break glass near a pool, it's very dangerous for people's feet, and it can also get into the pool. So plastic is the way to go. And this is my favorite plastic piece of glassware. It's really inexpensive. It's like maybe $3, maybe $4, I don't know. Retailers, I'm sorry, I don't remember the pricing exactly, but I know it's under $5. But this is a very thin plastic lip. It has a little notch on the side. It's very easy to hold with your thumb.
Perfect.
Easy to not drop because you don't want to waste wine either. You don't want to break your glass, but you also don't want to.
And how much is that corkscrew you were saying about? What do you estimate?
These are 12 to 15. They're very inexpensive. They're much less than the $200 ones that I can't operate.
Okay.
So yeah, I've seen them for $9.99, but there are so many places. Like this one was given away by Les Vins de Bergerac.
Okay.
There's so many wine companies that just give them away. So some people, you'll find them in wine shops that, you know, they've been given so many of them by their suppliers, they'll sell them for $3. So it just depends.
Well, on that note, we're going to stop because we're going to cut to a commercial break,
Okay.
and then we're going to return. We'll be back with Julie, who's going to talk about what gifts to give, for example, your boss, babysitter, if he or she is of age, as well as other family members. We'll be back with NewsMakers. Welcome back. Manny Garcia again from the Naples Daily News with my colleague Julie Glenn, who does our Going Grape column. And so now we're going to shift to gifts to give, for example, your boss, mother-in-law, babysitter, etc. So I'm going to really just throw it to you.
Throw it at
Okay,
me.
I've got my boss. I want to impress the publisher, Bill Barker. What do we get, Bill?
Oh, well, for Bill, I would probably get him a first growth Bordeaux because you want to go top of the line. That's the big boss. So you want to get him one that's good. If you can get an older vintage, that would be even better. It might cost you a little bit of money. It'll probably be close to maybe 60 to 70. So yeah, go for that. That first growth Bordeaux is always high end, and that'll be impressive.
So Bill be watching this and expecting that now.
Yes, yes. So sorry about that for
That's-
your budget, but
That's quite all right, quite all right. So let's say mother-in-law.
mother-in-law, okay, if your mother-in-law you get along with and you like, it depends on her taste. There are some people that are quantity over quality, and there's a way to gently not spend too much. There are a lot of really great labels out there that aren't very expensive. If you know that she doesn't know the difference between, you know, first growth Bordeaux, for example, and, you know, Central Coast Cabernet from California. Very different price points. Then just go for the coolest looking label that looks great, that you know is going to be good, and it's going to be, you know, just something that she likes. If she likes red, get a Cab. If she likes white, get Pinot Grigio, because those are the most blanket liked reds and whites of the two. And if she's adventurous, get her a dry rosé,
Wonderful.
which is the
Now-
best wine for Florida.
Okay. Say son-in-law or daughter-in-law.
Son-in-law or daughter-in-law. If you like them, okay. So it depends on what kind of an impression you want to make. If you want them to be impressed and somewhat intimidated, go Pinot Noir, because you just want to let them know that you are sophisticated and you know how to find a good Pinot Noir. If you want to make them feel incredibly welcome, I would probably get a red blend, because that is more of a all-encompassing. It has a lot of different grapes in it, and they're very easy drinking, not a lot of tannins, not very high acid. A lot of people are loving those right now. They're also very trendy, and usually your son or daughter-in-law is going to be younger, in most cases. So, I mean,
Right.
that would be what I would go with.
Now, say a neighbor, you've got snowbirds, everybody's coming in here, and you've got a new neighbor, and you want to just, it was a welcoming gift.
Okay, for that, what I would do, go to your favorite wine shop and ask for a case deal on something inexpensive and celebratory. For example, get a case of 12 bottles of Prosecco. Usually you will get a discount if you buy a solid case, and it'll be probably 10-15% depending on the retailer. And then your price on that, you can probably get it down around $10. You can take care of 12 people with Prosecco, and you got your mail carrier, you've got your, well, of course, yeah, I don't know about, and then you've got your babysitter perhaps can be
Sure,
lumped in there
sure.
if they're of age. Then your neighbors that you see occasionally, but sometimes they get the mail for you when you go out of town, but you want to give them something. So there are all those kind of people. You can take care of all the, and then also the unexpected guests. Oh, hey, I was thinking of you and I got this Prosecco. So you have one case of one solid thing, and it's always the same for all these different people, and you can spread the love and cheer that way.
Would you do that same thing, for example, if as a supervisor you want to give something to your colleagues or your direct reports, something like that too?
That would be a good work gift too. I think that's a safe work gift. Everybody loves Prosecco, and even if they don't, they can put some orange juice in it and have mimosas. You know?
True.
So even if it's not that great of Prosecco because you only got it for $10, it's okay. They can still make it okay. And plus, don't be worried if you get something for somebody and you think, oh, they're not going to like it. Well, if they don't like it, they still like having it to give to somebody that comes to their house that will like it, because everybody has different taste.
Now, what are the trendy wines or champagnes now, for example, that would make like a good last-minute gift also?
Well, kind of impressive would be the 007. They came out with Bollinger. They came out with a champagne that was like dedicated to the James Bond series.
Okay.
So that's kind of a cool, over-the-top, impressive wine. It's hard to get, but it's around. I've seen it on a couple of, not public shelves, but special ordered in a few different retailers. So that one's kind of nice. It comes in great packaging. Schramsberg has their 50-year anniversary bubbly that came out this year, and it's in special packaging. So that's a nice presentation gift, and it's, you know, it's an American winemaker that does high-end, world-class sparkling. So that would be a nice one to share with people. And if you can get any of those hard-to-find ones, I mentioned them in the Dear Santa column a couple weeks ago. Things like Dal Forno Amarone, Artadi, the Spanish wine that I talked about, their Tempranillo, the single vineyards. Those are really expensive, but they're really, really good.
Terrific. And then the last one I'll ask you about is for Star Wars. It opens now. It's going to be playing through the holidays. What's a good one to celebrate Star Wars?
You know, I'm not a Star Wars person, but I would say if you're going to be having popcorn with your Star Wars viewing, I would suggest a sparkling wine, because popcorn really needs some bubbles to go with it to kind of cut through that fat and salt.
Yeah.
And you want something thirst quenching, and you don't want really high alcohol, because if you're sitting there for 2.5 hours and or however long the movie is, and you're watching and drinking and having salt and stuff, and you want to have a lower alcohol wine, and usually sparkling is a little lower on the alcohol content, around 11%. So that way you can actually get up and walk out of the theater instead of stumble out. So that would be better.
A great way to close. Julie, I really want to thank you for being here today on NewsMakers.
It's been fun.
Again, Julie does a terrific Going Grape column, Julie Glenn. Her column's on Wednesdays in the Naples Daily News in the Neapolitan section. And on behalf of the Naples Daily News team, we'd like to thank you for watching us. Merry Christmas, wishing you the best, and a Happy New Year.